Welcome to another edition of the Roar of the Lions UK podcast. My name's Matthew Turner. Thank you so much for joining us for episode number 54, The Calm Before the Storm. This is the last one before the 2021 NFL Draft. So welcome in if you're listening on Twitch or YouTube live with us. We really appreciate you coming on. I'm here with my co-hosts, Ant, Steve, Ryan, and Tom. How you doing, boys?
Doing well, thanks.
Well, good, thanks. We're nearly there. The day is nearly upon us.
Nearly there.
Yeah. Not too long to wait. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for it to start. I cannot wait for the work to end. I can't tell you. It's been stressful, but it's been fun so far. Right. There's not a huge amount of news to go through, quite excitingly, for this one, so we can get into the meat of it. But there is one thing to discuss before we get into the draft for the Lions and a quick mailbag question. And it's the trade that went down today. So Eric Flowers of the Miami Dolphins has moved to the Washington football team for a late round pick swap, I believe in 2021, although I don't think that's been disclosed yet, unless I've missed that. And on the face of it, maybe that doesn't change things for the Lions too much. However, Miami picking at 6, and their tackle needs just increased. Now, Penei Sewell was mocked quite extensively to the Lions in recent weeks. Boys, does this mean that Sewell or Slater is going at 6, or a bigger chance of it, Steve?
I think it certainly affects the dynamic a little bit. I mean, Sewell was so confidently been mocked to the Bengals only like a couple of weeks ago, and all of a sudden, the thoughts are that they might go for Chase and Sewell might fall. But this is just one of those little jigsaw pieces that just changes everyone's mind a bit. But what happens, obviously, at the top of the board has such a big impact, heading downwards, and especially for the Lions. So it is very interesting to see, the kind of ripple effect that this will cause.
How about the rest of you guys? What do you think?
I don't think it changes all that much, really. I've heard it is the 2021. It's a late rounder. It's not been disclosed. He's told to be a competent starter, but for me, it doesn't really change anything. It could be more of a stopgap while they find the best place to put Sewell on the line. If I'm personally, we've seen him mocked to us, but I don't want him because I feel like it could somehow be forced to hinder Decker's influence. So I'd prefer Slater to the Lions than I would Sewell. So if he's gone off the board by the time he gets to us, it doesn't overly bother me.
Yeah, and he started obviously last year, but he was playing a guard, so they could kick Robert Hunt inside and then have a gap there. But I think any player that you're kicking out of town for a pick swap, not even for a pick, but for a pick swap, they're not going to change your draft plans that significantly, I don't think. I think they were always in play for Sewell. I don't think that's changed. It wouldn't surprise me if they went for him. I don't think this affects their strategy much.
What about you, Anthony? Sorry.
I was going to say, I kind of wonder whether their plan has always been to, have a pass catcher for the Dolphins, and this just could be a massive smokescreen.
Could well be. I mean, the pick that worries me is either Chase or Waddle there. I just don't want that to happen because I want the other one. Well, not the other one. I just want one of them. And my fear is that both will be gone by the time we pick if we can't move down. So, all right, that wraps up that news item. Otherwise, we did have one mailbag question, which I just want to touch on before we go into our draft specifically. But Ashley on our Twitter WhatsApp group asked thoughts on Amari Rodgers as a mid-round pick for the Lions. And why don't we start with you on that? Amari Rodgers, Clemson.
He's certainly an option there. This sort of the mid rounds are filled with a load of good slot guys who we could potentially take them. We are in need of receivers. Obviously, I've made my opinions known. I'm looking more towards Jalen Darden and Dwayne Eskridge in those rounds. But in terms of Rodgers himself, he's a really good slot guy. He's built he's built like a running back. He's got really big frame. He's got a lot of strength there. He's good downfield. He's really good on all three lengths of the field, really. So he's a fairly good one to get there, but he does need to develop a fair bit. But in those mid rounds, that's what you get really. But if we get him, he's a good prospect, but like I say, my eyes are elsewhere for this one.
He was awesome at the Senior Bowl. He looked really, really good. He's shifty. He's a lot bigger than he looked. So I think he's kind of 210 pounds. I assumed he was 190 the way he was moving. But then he tested pretty poorly. Not really badly, but I thought watching him at the Senior Bowl, I thought especially on agility drills, he'd really show up. I think his RAS score was around 5. So for a guy who's 5'9", and with all the slot talent there is, it wouldn't surprise me if he fell a bit. I really fancied him top of the 3rd going back around the Senior Bowl time. He may not even be a day 2 guy now. So I'd like him. I just would like to see a little bit more juice, especially in those agility drills.
I know I mentioned it a little while ago. I think I'm a little more high on his running partner there, Cornell Powell, at Clemson. He's more NFL ready to start with. He's got a bit less of a sample size, but I think he's the one who's going to have the immediate impact in the league. So, and he's probably going to go a bit later as well. So he represents a good option as well.
How about the rest of you on the Clemson wideouts in general?
I think this is a really deep slot receiver draft. There is so many guys that will be able to line up inside these smaller, stronger. You've got loads of running backs that will end up being drafted as slot wide receivers as well. So the depth is really far. But I think Powell did test a little better overall, despite a lesser workload to be seen. So I think both of them, you could probably get them both in maybe the 4th round. So I think one of them's got good value there.
Yeah, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC is probably the pick. At the bottom end of the second round. But you've still got. Will Elijah Moore and Rondale Moore fall further? It's hard to know because there's so much talent at the top end.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with the receiver class this year. A lot of talented guys are getting pushed down the board. So if you go in 3rd, you go in 4th, you're not necessarily getting guys who represent that sort of level where they're at. There are guys who could easily be going in the 2nd who just, through no fault of their own and through such a deep class are ending up down there. I mean, you've got guys like Daz Newsome falling maybe as far as 5, and he's a hell of a prospect. So, there are a lot of pickings to be had in the mid-rounds with the receivers this year. So if you don't go early, really, you don't need to worry about it.
I mean, your draft crush, Tamarian Terry, is down on the Draft Network's predicted board at 241 with 259 picks in play. So that's a mid to late 7th at this point. So potentially undrafted, and yet I swear I remember you saying that you'd be happy with him at the bottom of the 2nd round. Am I wrong?
3rd or 4th, let's say, a few weeks ago. But I don't know why he's projected so low. Such a strong frame. I know he didn't work out the best, but I think if you got him in the 5th or 6th round, I think we'd be absolutely laughing. He has got someone, him and let's say Terrace Marshall. People are predicting him quite highly. I think he could slide a little too. He'll be one of those maybe 3rd round, 4th round kind of guys. So I think there's an incredible crop of wide receivers, potentially better than last year.
Well, I'm just using the CBS one now, because just for my board that I'm doing here, and he's 116 on that Tamarian Terriers. So he's a lot higher. There's some boards he's in Ryan's estimations on.
Yeah, the variety is just mad. But one thing I think is fairly consistent is there seems to be kind of a top 3 tiers which stretch into kind of halfway down the 3rd round, maybe sort of pick 80 or so. And then there's a fair gap moving down kind of into the late 4th and just at the Draft Network, because that's what I have up at the moment. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown at 75, Eskridge 74, Collins 73, Tylan Wallace 76. So that's 4 in 4. And then Chatarius Atwell at 122 is your next guy. 4th, 50, 56 picks further down. So it feels like you get one of those guys or you reach in a bit, if you know what I mean, in terms of value. And the only thing I want from this draft for the Lions is value everywhere. Don't reach for anything, because we've got so many holes. There's absolutely no need. The best guy on your board, let's say it's a couple of guys, a few guys, has got to match up with need somewhere, right? Am I wrong?
No, you're right. There's a lot of classes this year: safety class, linebacker class, wide receiver class. A lot of talent in there, and you don't need to reach for them because you get value in quite a lot of the rounds you've got with them. So yeah, you're right that you don't need to stretch for anything with those guys. There are some, like the defensive tackles and the edges, that just have no idea about. But
we don't have a massive amount of draft capital. And the last thing that we need is the old Bob Quinn, smartest guy in the room. I'm going to unearth a pick that everyone else has missed. We just don't want that. I don't want to say play it safe, because I think it depends on how the board goes. Like, if you need to trade up and be aggressive, then do it. But let's not be, as the mantra that we've been saying for the last few weeks. Let's not fuck this up. How can we fuck this up?
Yeah, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Like, just avoiding screwing up. If you can avoid screwing it up, you've done quite well. Definition, right? Okay, so we've kind of briefly talked about the draft for us, but let's actually specifically go into what we planned, which is best case, worst case for the Lions. So, Steve, let's start with you, man. Let's hear your best case and worst case for the Lions, especially looking at round one.
Yeah, so I think we talked about it sort of extensively on the last couple of pods, but it's pretty obvious that Mac Jones isn't the kind of joke inclusion in the top half of the draft that maybe he was like a month ago. I think people have started to really think about the sort of strategy that someone like Shanahan is looking at, and all of a sudden there's a distinct possibility that Mac Jones could go at 3. And that very much brings the kind of 5 QBs drafted in the top 10 into play. And that absolutely falls into our hands. You know my views on Goff. I think we have to back Goff and give him this year. And in that case, we don't need to be drafting a quarterback. And with so many other teams, you look at Denver, the Patriots, the Bears, so many other teams that could potentially make a splash on a quarterback, that massively increases the value of our pick. So for me, if 5 quarterbacks go in the first 7 picks, I would imagine that there would be a trade up. Someone's going to trade up ahead of us, I think. Whether that's Atlanta, whether the Bengals decide to trade down, as I know a few people have mentioned, that would mean that Chase or Pitts would fall to us. And I think that's the best case. That's the best that we can hope for, because those 2 players are, on a different level from the kind of picks we're going to get at between 10 and 15. And I think even though we've got so many needs, and I'm very much with Ant in terms of banging on about reinforcing our defense, but I think if Chase or Pitts are there at 7, you invest in one of those players. The worst case scenario for me is we trade down, and we give someone our pick so they can trade up and get a quarterback, but then we end up somewhere in the no man's land around pick 20. Whether it's the Bears or Washington, we end up trading down, and we get a good pick for maybe 2022, but we then end up having to compromise and taking the 4th best wide receiver or the 3rd or 4th best offensive tackle. And particularly with the opt-outs this year, that's when it becomes a bit of a crapshoot in terms of, do we overdraft someone? So for me, that's the kind of, nightmare scenario. We trade down to say 20, and we end up taking, I don't know, Jenkins or Cosme or Darasaur at tackle, and they don't provide us with that impact that we need.
Not Darasaur, that's all I'm saying on that, please, God. Any blowback for Steve?
I'm going to disagree. I think the worst case scenario is take someone like Pitts, because we can't afford, he's a luxury pick in my opinion right now. I think he is someone that if you've got your outside sorted, look inside, work on your tight ends. But right now the wide receiver room there's players there, but there's some bare bones. And I think really my best case scenario is trade back, but I'm not going past 15 and I'm not taking any pick in 2022. So unless I get all the only offers that are all picks this year, I'm not moving back at all. But if I do go back, I only want this year's picks because we're in a pick now, not haul these picks and don't put them in a treasure chest and never use them because it's pointless. We just got some for Stafford. So I would sit at 7 if I don't like the trade. I'd take Slater if he's there because I think I'm going to plug him straight in at right guard. And I think he's going to be a day one start. I think that's where the weakness is on the right hand side of the line.
Just saw Ant look up there just to make sure that you weren't saying anything about our right tackle as opposed to our right guard.
Well done, Ryan.
Oh, Tom, what about you? Best case, worst case?
So best case from my standpoint, I think the realistic best case is 4 QBs in the top 6. The reason being I'm happy with Sewell, Pitts, or Chase. Now, best case, I think Jamar Chase is the best player who fits what we need. Not that we should be doing things to keep the fans happy, but I know a lot of people are out on QB. I'm personally not. I'd be happy with Fields or Lance, but Chase, I think if you went across the fan base, that would be the pick which most people are happy with. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think the only way it happens is, like I say, 4 QBs. Bengals have to go Sewell, and then either Dolphins go Pitts, or something which I do think can happen is Dolphins trade out. So I think there's a chance if they get an offer, and especially maybe if 3 QBs go and Fields and Lance are sitting there, someone comes up with the Dolphins there. So that's best case. Worst case for me is 3 QBs go, doesn't matter which 3. And then Sewell, Chase, and Pitts all go 4 to 6, and then we can't trade back. So for me, they're the 3 non-QB guys. And whilst I'm not particularly high on, say, Waddle, Smith, Slater, all those guys are fine, I just don't really like it at 7 from a value standpoint. And to your point about trying to maximize value in this draft, I feel like to move back kind of a handful of spots, if it's doable, even for less compensation than we'd ideally want or we're used to seeing in kind of mock draft simulators, I'd be happy with. The other absolute doomsday darkest timeline scenario, which no one's referenced. So we obviously know Brad Holmes picked Jared Goff, right? And what did Jared Goff have? He was unathletic, but he had accuracy. And we had a North Dakota quarterback on the board. We had an athletic guy with all the tools. And what did he do? Went in another direction. So absolute darkest timeline. Mac Jones doesn't go 3, but he's sitting there at 7, and Brad Holmes finds the next Jared Goff.
See, I apart from that, which is obviously a very dark timeline, I thought the darkest timeline there was you were going to say, what did Jared Goff have? A running back. Let's pick Najee Harris at 7.
That was Chris Sims' mock draft today, wasn't it? Or no, it wasn't. I saw another mock draft which had Najee Harris at 7. I was just like, fantastic. Can't wait.
Do you not think the Bengals will be tempted to reunite Chase with Burrow?
Yeah, I really do. Up until the last few days, I thought that was going to be pretty much locked in. It feels like some of the rumors coming out now is they might be going back to leaning towards Sewell. And from a pure team building standpoint, you'd think that's the play. Because, I mean, your quarterback has a giant scar on his knee from what happened last year, right? So I would think the smart team building play is probably Sewell. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they took Chase. And I think then it gets interesting because back to the earlier discussion, what do the Dolphins do at 6? Do they take Waddle or Smith? Or do they take Sewell? Or could they go Micah Parsons and be like, he's the future of our defense? So,
If they went Chase, then if I was Burrow, I'd ring the police and say that my club were trying to murder me deliberately, because that is the message that it sends out. It's, we don't care if you die. You've got someone to throw to, so try your best. It's sheer gross negligence if they pass on Sewell, and someone should go to jail.
And I mean, you know, the point is that Burrow's going to be facing the Steelers defense twice a year. He's going to be facing the Ravens defense. You know, even the Browns have got a defense now with, like, you know, Garrett. I mean,
never mind, got a defense. The Browns are in with a shout of best defense in the league right now.
So Ant's right. It is absolute negligence. But then again, I don't know, because the Bengals have got a funny history, and they've got a bit of a history of trading down as well. So I don't know. Anything could happen. I think this is the thing. Anything could happen.
I think this is one of the drafts where like kind of people go, oh, the draft begins at 3 or the draft begins at 4. And while that's kind of right, because of how this has all happened, because of how much uncertainty there is, the draft doesn't just begin at that time, but it explodes. Like, no one knows what's going to happen. I mean, at 4, how many different ways could Atlanta go? I mean, I know that we've kind of shoehorned them into, well, it's Pitts or it's QB or it's trade out. But each one of us has massive butterfly effect implications on what happens below it. Huge, huge. And did you want to weigh in on the best worst case?
Well, I think pretty much anyone who's been on this pod can probably read out word for word what my best case is for this, because I've harped on about it for so long. But
well, for those people who haven't seen you before and they're intrigued
I've been set on my top 5 guys for a long time now. But for me, our best case scenario, you know the guy I want. I want Micah Parsons more than anyone. I want the defensive rebuild to start. So if we could trade back to 15. If Mac Jones goes 3rd and Fields falls and there is interest in him from the Patriots, as has been speculated, if we could go back to 15, garner some picks this year, because I'm in the category with Ryan. I don't want to stockpile any more for the future. I want this rebuild to be evenly balanced, not just lopsiding it in 2022. If we can get back to 15, pick up Parsons if he's there, or if not, pick up Owusu Koromoa. I'd be very happy with him as well. Pick up one of the 2 elite prospects for me at linebacker, and then use the next couple of picks on defense as well. I know Lions fans won't like it, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done on it, and it needs to start now whilst there's such good classes for safety and linebacker. So back to 15, get Parsons, get Karamoa, get Grant, get Jabril Cox, get a few wide receivers after that. For me, that's the best situation we could have this year. The worst, which I think we mentioned last week, would be to go back further than that. If we end up going back to 19 and 20 and we try and pick someone from this edge class, who I don't think there's any value in any of them at that level, I think we've shot ourselves in the foot if we do that. I don't want to go near the edge class in round 1, and I don't want to go back that far. I want an elite guy this year now, because the defense or the wide receiver core need a top elite guy.
So for my part, I'll weigh in with best and worst as well, and then that'll round us all off. So my best case scenario has changed so many times. I do not know if I want to stick at 7 and just take a quarterback. That is an interesting best case scenario, perhaps. It's not that I'm down on Goff, but my case is this, and it's quite simple. You are not paying Goff another contract, pretty much under any circumstances. If Goff plays to a Mahomes-ish type level, fine, okay, good. If he is top 15, which he has been in the past, you consider it, but given the amount of money he's been paid in the past, how much he'd likely demand in the future, I don't think you're paying him that, even if he's top 15, especially at the age he'd be at that sort of time. You'd be looking to invest in a new quarterback anyway. So, you have, in my mind, a 3-year timeline with Goff, and that's it. You then need a new quarterback. Okay, well, you can cut him earlier than that. We've all heard about the fact that, he's been restructured, but actually, dev money isn't that restrictive. We know this. So, the ideal scenario for me is taking quarterback this year or next year, because I'd like a quarterback to actually sit for a year to learn under someone who mechanically Goff is actually quite good. He's a bit robotic, but in someone who perhaps likes to make up as he goes along a bit, or kind of, someone who's good at improvisation. Learning from someone like Goff could be really, really useful. He may not be the best teacher, we don't know. But if a quarterback falls to you in the perfect spot, where you don't have to reach, we can keep our first round picks for next year to really weaponize this team on the upslope after a down year this year, if someone like Justin Fields falls to you, that is absolutely perfect for me. Sit him for a year. We don't know if he's quite ready. Few doubts about him. Learn from someone who's been to a Super Bowl. Start next year. That's absolutely perfect for me. Or Fields is available at 7 and someone comes in with an insane offer. And we've got 4 first-round picks next year. Fantastic. Great. But Fields at 7 available. He is up there for me as a perfect case scenario. The other perfect case scenario for me is that we trade down, and we trade down quite a long way for a haul. I'm thinking the Bears at 20. I'm thinking many first-round picks to really make it hard for that team for the next few years going forward. I'm thinking Baltimore for 2 first-round picks and a third this year for 7. I think they might. They're on the brink of greatness, but they need to actually go up and get an elite guy now. But we need several dudes. And I think with the uncertainty of this year, you need a couple of swings. If you connect on one, great. But give yourself 2 first-round picks. That's terrific too. Worst case scenario is very similar to Tom. 3 quarterbacks go, and you're left with Lance and Jones, where I don't think people are going to be too excited to trade up for them, and yet the skill players have gone ahead. So I know that was a bit of a longer explanation, but what do you guys think? Am I just totally misguided by QB at 7?
I think we all sort of said, well, I know myself and Ryan did, we said if he was sat there, he'd probably, on the outside, we wouldn't be happy, but on the inside, I think we'd probably be very happy, because, I was tooting his horn for ages at the start of this year, and, well, at the start of this season until we got Goff. Fields was the one guy I wanted more than anything, but I don't know. It's a hard one. I think if you draft at 7, you're basically saying to Goff, bye-bye. You've not even played a snap, and we've already replaced you. You're giving him no incentive to play well, to do anything. You can't shut the door on him straight away. I don't think. I feel he's come in here. He's had it rough with McVay. McVay's got off scot-free from that thing with him, because I think his scheme is as much to blame as Goff is for what went wrong there. But everybody blamed Goff. And if you just give up on him now, I think that's just going to be really detrimental to him.
I do agree with that, absolutely. But I do think that we owed sentimentality to Matthew Stafford. We really, really did. But while we've got Goff in, we don't owe him anything. And it would be nice to give him a chance. I do want to give him a chance. But
we never had to take him. We could have done the deal without him. He was added to the deal specifically. If we didn't want to use him, why not just take the firsts and leave Goff with them?
I actually don't believe that. But
Let's not forget, right? The NFL draft is that, if you're going to be picked in the first round of an NFL draft, you are going to be highly scrutinized and analyzed to within an inch of your life. Jared Goff was the number 1 pick in the 2016 draft, and he had 2 really good seasons at the Rams before the wheels came off. And where do the Lions want to be over the next 2 or 3 seasons? We want to get in the playoffs. We want to win a playoff game. These are things that we've not done for 30 years since we won a playoff game. We do not need a top 5 QB to win a playoff game. We do not need Patrick Mahomes. We need a competent, solid, good QB. Matt Stafford has not been a top 5 QB in the league for the last few seasons. Yeah, I think Stafford is always going to be between like 5 and 10 and has that ability to be great. But Goff is not that far behind Stafford based on his performance in 2017 and 2018. And we need to give Goff a chance. We need to let him have a season and a half before we make any decisions. And for me, spending the number 7 pick like right now before he's even taken a snap is just crazy when there are so many needs on this team. The defense is like Swiss cheese every fucking week. So, I just think it's an overreaction before we see what Goff can offer.
And you could soon end up with a Packers-like situation. They thought Rodgers was on the down, but now, what are they doing with Love? They've wasted a pick and extra picks to go and get him. And now he's going to be sat there for years if they have their way. So they messed up their last draft by going up early for a quick QB.
But the situations aren't. You're not comparing apples with apples. You know, Love was.
But if Goff has a good year though, then we've got a very good quarterback on our hands. Like Steve says, we don't need a top 5 guy, but a good Jared Goff will get us into the playoffs and will win us playoff games. And if we go and, you know, if Fields sits here for a year, if this time in 12 months Goff's had a really good year, then, you know, we're going to be stuck. And that's the thing there. I think he needs to be given at least a year. And if you look at the guys who are coming through, it's not going to be the last chance to get a good QB. I mean, we were having a look yesterday, and there looks like some really promising guys coming through in the next couple of years. And we're probably going to have a good pick on them as well if it goes wrong. That's why we've got the extra first next year, to be able to move up and grab a guy if the experiment fails. You know, that's part of having this extra capital. We've got a safety net against Goff being bad. You know, and we don't need to spend a pick on a QB this year because of that. We can start, because, you know, Stafford never had a defense on his hands. If we just draft someone really good and still don't give them a defense, it's going to be the same as the last 12 years. We're just going to suffer again. We're not going to have a team around him. That defense needs a hell of a lot of work. So start on that now. So at least, even if you get a QB in 2 or 3 years, he's going to have a team to work with, not a broken shell.
You're going to spend a number 7 pick on someone like Trey Lance, who's only really played one competitive season, and that's against, like, you know, semi-good opposition.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not arguing for Trey Lance. I will say that, but I am pounding the table for Fields. I'm not saying he's as good as Lawrence or better than Lawrence, but he has outplayed him in the occasions where they've played against each other. And I don't think that's coincidence. I think Fields brings his best in the big games. But what I'm saying, Ant, to your point, just quickly, and then I'll shut up and let the other guys have a say, is that we have the safety net with Fields in the form of 2 first-round picks next year. I agree. What I'm saying is, if we don't think that we can make the playoffs this year, which I don't think is a stretch, then even if we're good this year, we're in no man's land with a problem, and we have to spend one of those picks to go up, if not more. What I'm saying is, why don't we make the safety net a QB this year who is told they are not playing the entirety of the year in a Mahomes-esque way? Yeah, it's not comparable to Love, because Love was a mid-second, early third-round pick who got vastly overdrafted. Fields was 1B quarterback for a good portion of his college career. That's now the safety net, and the 2 first-round picks, when we've got through this year coming, are the guys that can actually really make us explode next year, because in 2022, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that we could threaten a wildcard spot. But that's the year. This year, write it off now. Let's get the safety net this year not to reach, and keep the value we've got next year.
But he's an NFL starter. He's that good, Justin. I love Justin Fields. I'd love it if we drafted him, but just not in the position we're at. He is an NFL starter. You can say to him, yeah, you're not going to play for 2 years, but he's going to start agitating to play eventually. And if you're putting that much capital in, like I say, you're giving Goff no reason whatsoever. We're paying him a lot of money. You've got to give him the incentive there to play and get his chance. And is that not the culture you want here? I mean, you know, do you not want players to be given a chance? If we become a team that just doesn't give players a chance, you develop a negative culture. It's like why I've argued so hard against Crosby getting replaced this year, because he was one of the few guys who took a massive step forward last year and put up some really good stats in a really bad situation. If you want guys like that who are going to work their arse off to get into this team and then just say, nah, see ya, bye-bye, that is not a good culture to foster.
I think that's the best argument against. I do think it's the best argument against, for sure. Ryan, Tom, how are you feeling on this?
So I'm relatively pro QB, but putting that to one side, and I disagree with what the Packers did last year. I was happy for obvious reasons, but the Jordan Love pick was bad. Jordan Love still has value though, right? And I think QB is more than other picks. If you take a QB at 7 and it hits, wonderful. Jared Goff still has value from a trade. Obviously not this year, but fast forward a year or two, he has value there. So he's not a sunk cost in that way, right? If Goff balls out and with Fields or whoever not really seeing the field, they're not going to tank their value that much that suddenly Justin Fields next year isn't worth anything in the same way Jordan Love now isn't not worth anything, right? So Justin Fields, even if he doesn't play a down for the Lions or a meaningful down, still has value going forward. What doesn't have value is if you go through this year without a QB, you've got 2 first rounders next year. The chance that the guy you want is sitting there on your pick is slim unless you've got the number 1 overall pick. And we don't want the number 1 overall pick, but it's realistic we might have a top 5 pick. So do you then risk giving up both those first round picks to go get your guy next year rather than taking one who falls into your lap this year? So I think from a pure value standpoint, it's there. If we'd spent picks to go up and get someone this year, I would have been really against it. If we sit there and take one, I'm relatively happy. 50% of the QBs, I'd say Lawrence has a good chance of hitting, so I'll keep him out of it. Out of the other 4, 2 are going to bust. All the kind of past data shows that, right? So you've got to take a swing at some time. I'm for taking one because I do still think they have value. If you draft Sewell, if you draft Waddle, and they don't hit, their value is tanked. QB is about the only pick which holds value if the player doesn't necessarily pan out.
How about you, Ryan?
Without being harsh, I don't like Goff. I didn't want Goff and I don't want him. He's just a byproduct of a trade. I disagree. I don't think that trade even happens if they can't pound Goff off on us. For me, it's just a stopgap. He isn't going to win as a playoff game if he plays well. If the defense don't play well, we've seen that for years. Stafford couldn't win a playoff game because we had defenses that were mainly crap half the time. He's just a stopgap for 2 years. So I don't care if we take a QB at 7 or in the top 5 next year, to be perfectly honest. The way I see it is he's going to have to play lights out to convince me in 2 years when the money runs out that he's worth keeping around. But I'll support him while he's here, but it don't bother me one iota whether he gets replaced next year or not by a rookie, to be honest.
All right. Let's round this up by talking about the most likely scenario. Just give me, in the first round, where the Lions are picking and who they're picking and a quick reason why. Let's start with Ryan. Let's start with
you. I think most likely we're going to be sticking at 7. I don't feel like we've had trade interest now, but is there going to be enough to warrant moving it? We've been told by Dan Campbell there's a group of 3 or 4 guys that he really likes at 7. I'm pretty sure Micah Parsons is in one of them. Now, if we're going to take him or not, I don't know. But right now, I think it's going to end up being a wide receiver. And I would like Jamar Chase, if he ain't there, I'm happy with Waddle because he's my wide receiver too. So I think he's going to be an instant impact on that offense.
All right, Steve?
I really think that we're going to see a lot of trading up for QBs, and I can really see first 4 picks, 4 QBs. I think the Falcons could trade out of 4, or the Falcons could take like Lance to sit behind Matt Ryan. And I think that gives us a chance at Sewell or Chase or Pitts. So I think our best case scenario is being able to take one of those 3.
But what? Okay, so who in the most likely scenario though? Who do you think the pick is? Just pick one. It's all right.
I can see Chase dropping to 7. I can see it happening.
I like that.
And I'd be delighted with that.
And what's most likely for you, man?
Well, doing our mock drafts, it was a lot of my reasoning was predicated on Matt Jones going 3rd, and his odds are holding to go 3rd. It looks like that is the likely thing now, and I think that blows this draft wide open because that means Lance and Fields are sitting there, and one of them's going to drop down to us to be able to give us some trade back value. So I can see us trading back. I can see it going. Matt Jones goes 3rd. Then I think Denver are going to pounce, get up to 4th, take the 4th guy, probably Fields. And then I think the board's going to fall to us where the Patriots are going to panic and go for Lance. I don't think they've got anything to worry about at 5 or 6, and they're first in queue to trade up if they need to, out of all the QB needy teams after. I think we're the first pressure point, and I think they'll trade with us. So, and then we pick a linebacker at 15. I think that is a good. I think there's a good chance that happens now with Jones going 3rd.
Parsons at 15, or do you think he
I would like it, but I think having a look at what I think the Giants are eyeing him up a lot. If he falls past the Giants, then I think we get him at 15. But if not, I'll take Jock. I think Jock's just only slightly less good, but that's still pretty damn good.
All right.
So, the nightmare scenario on that one is that we get down to pick 14. You're one away from Parsons, and the Vikings take Parsons at 14 to replace Anthony Barr, who's probably leaving next year. That would be a nightmare scenario for me.
As long as they don't pick a quarterback, because I want to carry on mocking Kirk Cousins for the rest of my days.
How about you, Tom? What's the most likely thing happening on Thursday night?
I'm a bit more pessimistic because those mostly sound like great options. So I'm going to go with 3 QBs up top, Pitts, Sewell, Chase off the board. And I think we'll take Rashawn Slater. I think he's probably the safest, least interesting pick at that level. But I could see the front office not necessarily valuing another receiver at 7 and wanting to pick up a guy later in the draft. So I think Slater's probably the safest. It then means he can slot in at guard or tackle. And so, yeah, that's what I'm kind of mentally preparing myself for as a not particularly exciting but realistic scenario.
But to add, though, 2 years ago, I got a draft notification. We did take Frank Ragnow, and that was seen as the not sexy pick. So this could be just as effective. So I think sexy is not the way to go this time.
Yeah, I think I hated that at the time as well. So what do I know?
Yeah, so I think Slater would be a great pick, but maybe like Slater would be a great pick at say 9 or 15.
Yeah, completely agree. I'm not sure he would last to 15, but if we could get back to 9 or something, 100%. As I mentioned, I'm not hugely keen on taking him at 7, but I don't really think if Pitts, Sewell, Chase all go, I don't really feel comfortable with anyone at 7. So that's just a direction I could see the Lions going to try and solidify up front.
So for my pick, I'm going to be quite boring and say that I think there are so many picks that are almost equally likely, kind of doing something kind of similar to us. It kind of reduces the likelihood of all of them happening. So I think there is a 15% chance each, maybe, that we take Pitts, Chase, Sewell, Slater, Waddle, and Smith. That is 75% of your options. The remaining 25%, and my most likely option, is the only defensive player who could potentially go at 7. I think the most likely pick, because he offers something different and no one is harming his chances, is Micah Parsons. It's not me saying it's likely. I'm saying there's a 25% chance of it happening. I just think there's so many other options that the way I frame the question means that is the answer for me.
Lions Twitter would definitely be interesting. It'd be polarizing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think we'd kill each other.
I've been one of his biggest fans for the last few weeks, and you all know, like you say, I do really like him, and I do see the value in off the ball linebacker even at 7.
Yeah, you look. The Bears did it with Roquan Smith. The Buccaneers did it with Devin White, and you're telling me there's no Lions fans out there who would kill to trade for either of them now? Of course they would. He's in that category. There is absolutely no argument that he's not worth that top 10 pick, because he is. He's a potential game changer on that defense, and that's what our defense needs. A game changer.
All right, let's move this on to our last bit, which is sleeper picks for round 1 and hot takes, which I'm just going to group together because I think there's a lot of overlap between those two things. So I'm going to come to you first, Tom. And who do you think is someone who might sneak into the first round, or is there anything, maybe a first rounder that you think might slip quite a long way? Tell us something shocking that you think is going to happen.
So there's going to be shocking things in this first round because of this whole last year. I'm finding it pretty hard to work out who they are because I feel like mock drafts have stayed the same since about January. Guys who I think could come into round one who aren't necessarily talked about. One who is talked about a bit more, Javonte Williams, who, hot take alert for me, is the best running back in the draft. I think he's Nick Chubb 2.0. He's got amazing contact balance. He's by no means a burner, but I'm a big fan. I think he could easily go in round one. Guy who's less talked about, but also from UNC, Diami Brown. So he's been a pretty steady day two guy, I'd say, but maybe fringe second, third round. Vertical receiver. I feel like these receivers are going to go all over the place away from what we've seen, which is all the mocks talking about the top three. And then Bateman and Will the Moores go. I think there's going to be a few curveballs in there as well. And as we get at the end of round one, there's going to be a load of guys still on the board. So those two, I think if we're going even more surprising, Walker Little, big time recruit at Stanford tackle, but hasn't played in 2 years. So medicals are obviously a massive flag this year, but teams don't necessarily have the data on it. So do they just go super, risk conscious and risk averse and step away from it? I think there'll be a couple guys who aren't being talked about, like Walker Little, who get pushed up. So he's one guy that I could see a team taking a flyer on. And then finally, Levi Onwuzurike. So he's a guy who lost a lot of traction coming out of the Senior Bowl. He got bullied in the run, even in the kind of 5-6 reps he took. But we talked about it before, poor defensive tackle class. He's the best penetrator and best pass rusher in the interior defensive line. Wouldn't surprise me if he then went to a contender at the back end of the first round. And I'll save some hot takes to go around again, so I'm not just continually talking.
How about you, Ant? What are you feeling?
In terms of surprise guys who could go in the first, I know I did put him in my mock draft there, but I've not seen anyone put him in. But I'm of the opinion that Creed Humphrey will go first round. I think he's an absolutely monumental center, and if we were near the back of the first round and we didn't have one, I'd be all over him in the first round. I think the Packers will get him. I just have this sneaking suspicion that Corey Linsley's gone. They need a new guy. He'll be the one to go there, but I suppose he was in my draft, so it's a bit of a cheat. The other one, I'd go the other running back from North Carolina, Michael Carter. I'm huge on him. I think he's really good, and I think he's potentially, because he's a better receiver than Javonte Williams, I think he offers a little bit more, especially if you're going to pick so high. So I think there's a chance that he could sneak in as well, you know, if the right team's there looking for him. And the other one, the other center, I forgot his name now. Oh, this is great because I'm just on him. Landon Dickerson. Is it Landon Dickerson?
Yeah. Landon Dickerson.
Yeah, Landon Dickerson. Sorry, I think I've seen a few mocks with him in, but I think he's got the potential to get in as well. So, but I think Creed Humphrey's going to go in there. He's my big one that no one's talking about. I think he's completely worth a first round pick.
How about you, Ryan?
My hot take is I think Jamin Davis might sneak into the end of the first round. He's a linebacker that's built a lot of traction, and I think that his pro day really helped him. The workout was really good. He seems to be someone that is on the cusp, and I think he's someone that's regarded as maybe the third best linebacker now. So I could see him sliding him somewhere between Jock. My very spicy take is I could see someone being stupid enough to take Kellen Mond. I can see someone trading down from 31 or 32, someone in the second round trading up, a QB needed team, because he's a real project, but he's got a lot of talent, he's got a lot of tools. I hope it's someone stupid enough like the Bears. That'd be really funny. Yeah. He could be there.
What about you, Steve?
I think for a kind of sleeper player, I'm a bit surprised that Joseph Osai, the linebacker from Texas, hasn't been mocked in the first round. I think he's kind of like mainly sort of mocked mid-second round, but he's a guy whose RAS score was like 9.49. He's a little bit undersized, but it's like his explosion and his speed are like absolutely elite. He played linebacker for Texas, but I think he's listed as an edge in the draft, and I can see him sneaking into the first round So I think he's probably one that's been missed off the board. My hot take relates to the Chicago Bears. So in my with my other hat on, writing for the NFL Scotland, I am blessed with covering the Chicago Bears as part of the NFC North. And there is a guy that we all need to have our eyes on Thursday night, Mr. Ryan Pace. So Mr. Ryan Pace is the guy who drafted Mitchell Trubisky when in fact traded up for Mitchell Trubisky when Mahomes and Deshaun Watson were both still on the board. And this is the guy who has unsuccessfully tried to bring Russell Wilson to the Bears when he had that meeting in North Dakota, that a secret meeting with Seattle that everyone seems to know about. I mean, how can you have a meeting in North Dakota and the entire world's press find out about it? If you're going to have a meeting anywhere, surely North Dakota's the place to keep it on the down low. This is also the guy who had a failed attempt to bring Kenny Golladay to the Bears, which would have been a real slap in the face for all Lions fans. But, you know, the Bears are absolutely on the edge of a cliff. The embarrassment of announcing Andy Dalton as their starting QB. Bears fans are not happy. And if the Bears do not have a good season, both Pace and Matt Nagy will be out of a job. So Pace is going to do something on Thursday night. He is going to try and make a splash. He is going to try and save his job. And he is going to make a massive reach. I think he realizes that Dalton is just not going to wash. So I think they're at pick number 20. So I can see the Bears trying to get in the top 10 and absolutely throwing draft capital at someone, hopefully us. I mean, that would be fantastic. But I can just see them reaching for Trey Lance or maybe Justin Fields. And I really hope it happens because it will be just hilarious.
So Ryan Pace, architect of failure. I like it. Tom, do we have you already? I can't recall. No.
Yeah, I've been some sleep.
Sorry, beg your pardon. Right, my turn then. Okay, so I'll start with my hot take because I feel very strongly about this. Gregory Rousseau will not be taken in the top 2 rounds. Gregory Rousseau will fall to 70 or something. I think his testing after a year out was so poor. And there are a number of edges out there. I think that although his physical attributes are incredible, that the explosion, the speed, everything that you're looking for in someone like him didn't exist. And if you have a year off, and the only thing you have to do for a calendar year is prepare for your pro day, and you fail, I just think it's a damning indictment on a player who simply couldn't be bothered. And I just don't think it's going to wash with GMs who have plenty of options elsewhere. So that's one hot take. The other hot take is I think 3 running backs are now going to go in the first round. I think it's one of those things where people say, oh, people are catching up to the PFF way of thinking, don't take a running back in the first round. And then I think these GMs just no, this is gonna put us over the top. And there's 3 running backs who could be taken in the first round. I've seen mocks this week that have put all 3 as the number 1 running back. Several of them. It's not just an isolated one. So Javonte Williams, I was listening to the NC show today. He was comfortably, apparently, the 3rd running back. He was a little below the other 2. Najee Harris has been consistently mocked as the number 1, probably to Pittsburgh in the first round. You know, it's one of those things. But actually, on PFF's board, it's the other one. His name escapes me.
Travis Etienne.
So apparently, he's the best one. So if we all can't decide, and actually these GMs just decide, we're just going to go for it, I think that there's a good possibility that happens. In terms of other first-round sleepers, I am looking at people like Boogie Basham. I think that if someone's going to benefit from Rousseau's fall, I think it's him. The other one who I think might, because I think people are going to fall in love with how he tested, even though he has no production in college really, is Milton Williams. in a very, very poor interior defensive line class, if you constantly get compared to, and in fact told that you tested better than the multi-time defensive player of the year, Aaron Donald, there's got to be one GM that thinks, screw it, we'll take him. We'll have him. Maybe someone like Tampa Bay at 32. When you've got an embarrassment of riches, you can afford to take someone like that. So there's mine. Any thoughts? Because we're going to wrap up, I think, afterwards.
I heard that that your combine day actually went better than Russo's pro day, Matt.
Just made me choke, you bastard. Yeah. I haven't done any sort of physical exercise pretty much for a year. I've just been kind of a hermit inside. I found out that white men can't jump is true for vertical and horizontal. But I think in my very first 40-yard dash that I probably managed to break 6 seconds, something like 5.8. I haven't quite looked at it yet, but I was secretly quite pleased with that. But I really would like to dip below 5.5. You guys all have to do this, by the way. You're doing it.
Just like to point out that Tori Petrie ran a 40-yard dash in under 6 seconds whilst wearing heels.
Is that true, or were you just having improper thoughts at the time and you're not sure how much time passed?
That was Cynthia Freeland, and that's another story.
I'm Tori Petrie. I'm her fan.
Oh, I see. Right, any more thoughts, boys, before we sign off?
Can I quickly make some people really angry with a few hot takes?
Do it. Go. I like spicy.
Yep.
Jalen Phillips, best defensive player in the draft. He's I don't know if he's going to stay on the field. If he does, he will be the best defensive player to come out of this draft. He won't be the first defensive player drafted. That's going to be JC Horn. That's my.
That is a spicy take. I'm on board with Phillips, but Horn, really?
I don't necessarily. Well, actually, I quite like Horn, but I think he might go to the Panthers, especially if, say, Sewell's off the board, or especially if Sewell and Slater are off the board. So I could see that happening. Elijah Moore is going to be as good, if not better, as a pro than Jalen Waddle. There's two parts to that, which is one, I'm a big Elijah Moore fan, and I'm slightly low on Waddle. But also, Waddle is probably going to go to a team like the Lions, who are potentially struggling towards the top. Elijah Moore is probably going to find himself in the 20s with a contender, better set up for success. And I think he has a lot of the things that Waddle does as well. So I could see him having a better career. Javon Holland, better than Richie Grant. I only partly believe that one, but I think for the Lions as well, he feels more of that slot safety role. I could see him being more effective. And then the one that I actually do believe probably the most out of all of these, Josh Palmer. I think he's going to be the best wide receiver taken outside of the top 50. Bullied SEC cornerbacks and big names. So he's beat Satan for touchdowns. He's beat a load of guys who are going to get drafted in the first few rounds. So he's not going to go in the top 50. I think he'll be the best wide receiver taken outside of it.
I love that. I love that very much. Phillips, I am 100% on board with. I would have him as a top 5 pick in the draft, were it not for the injury worries. Supremely productive. He looked like he was enjoying it, but he looked like he was always giving them problems. Maybe didn't have quite the production that the problems he was causing looked like he would, and yet he was still very productive. Just looked confident on the field. I liked his swag.
It wouldn't surprise me if you went top 10. It also wouldn't surprise me if he was there when the Lions pick in the second round. I really hope he is, but it's who knows when it comes to medicals this year for most players, but with him especially, just who knows. But only one GM's got to pull the trigger, right?
Yeah. I think Jason Owe could go in the top 20. I mean, crazy athletic. And I think someone will take a gamble on him.
Okay. All right.
I think he'll bust as well. I think he's a massive bust candidate as Jason Owe.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of the edge that we took for a year. Charles Harris. Just athletic, but he's going to be a situational designated pass rusher, and that's basically what he's going to be through his career. I like that.
It's just he didn't get any, after an amazing 2019 season, he played 7 games and didn't get a single sack. I mean, I've not watched enough Penn State to know whether he was just double teamed all the time, but it is a bit of an odd stat.
If you're that athletic, it means that your technique is really poor. It must do. Like, if you're that fast, you just need a bit of technique to beat people at that level. I don't care how good they are. You're testing in the top 1% of human beings. So just beat them.
Yeah. But for someone like him, situation is huge. Massive variances both sides. He lands in a great situation and he can just develop as a situational pass rusher. Good chance of success. If he's asked to start, he's going to get bullied versus the run and he's going to probably flame out. So, yeah, massively based on situation.
All right. Any more? All right.
I just think there's going to be a lot of craziness. I think there's a lot of people. You know, I mean, we've not even mentioned Jerry Jones. I mean, Jerry Jones has been making eyes at Kyle Pitts, you know, for the last month now. Yeah, there's going to be a crazy trade up like that, and I just think, you know, we're talking about the value of the pick. I mean, that's why the number 7 pick is just so worthwhile, because if someone wants to do something stupid, the chances are they might have to come to the Lions to do it, and I'm sure we will happily take their draft capital.
I think last year was probably the least interesting draft I can remember in terms of things going against what was predicted. So I'm hoping this year it goes wildly the other way. I think it's going to be a crazy one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we knew for 6 months last year we were taking Okuda, and we didn't like it before, and we didn't really like it after. So he just ticked him off as he got picked.
All right. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. In terms of our upcoming episodes, you've probably heard me talk about it before, but it is the NFL draft starting Thursday through Saturday. We are going to be live throughout the coverage. So we're going to be reacting to it. We're going to have upwards of 30 guests. They're all booked in. Day 1 schedule has dropped. Days 2 and 3 are going to drop shortly after this episode has aired. We also have the preview and roundup shows, which are going to be about an hour long. I'm going to be releasing those as podcasts shortly after they are recorded too. So please join us for that on YouTube and Twitch. I'll put the socials up on Twitter shortly. But almost every team is represented. So it's not going to be a Lions echo chamber. There's going to be a slight bias because, it's going to be the 5 of us on. But almost every single team is represented. I think there's 2 that I'm short on, and I'm still working on trying to get them on. But it's been a real struggle to find some of those teams out there. It's amazing that the Lions have a more reliable fan base, I think, in this country than some more successful teams out there. But there we go. Anyway, our socials. YouTube, it's Raw the Lions UK. Twitch, ROTL_UK. On Facebook, it's Raw the Lions UK. And the group is Detroit Lions Fans UK 1 Pride Worldwide. On Twitter, it's ROTL_UK. Instagram, ROTL.UK. On the web, it's rawthelionsuk.com. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. If you have a review on Apple Podcasts with a question, we will answer it as soon as possible. Just remains for me to thank my co-hosts Ryan, Tom, Steve, and Ant. We now have, following a very special interview with former Detroit Lions offensive tackle Jason Fox. Please stay tuned for that, which will be up in a couple of minutes live with us. But thank you, boys, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Evening, boys. Pride.
Ryan Pace, don't let us down.
Hello and welcome everyone to the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, and hello to our special guest, Jason Fox, former Detroit Lions, University of Miami and Miami Dolphins offensive lineman. How are you, Jason?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan? Thanks for having me, guys.
I'm great, thank you. Thanks very much for coming on and taking time out of your day to speak to us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
my pleasure.
And for the listeners at home, I'm just going to give everyone a brief run through. We've done our homework, so we've uncovered every stone. We know all about you, Jason. You hail from Fort Worth, Texas. You went to North Crowley High School. You came out of there as a 3-star rated tight end, but would move to O-line. You had offers from the likes of Arizona, Oklahoma State, and in-state TCU, Texas Tech, and A&M, but you would choose the University of Miami. You would go on to play 47 games, be a captain as a junior, and you would then move on and declare for the draft, where you would be selected with pick 128 in round 4 for the Detroit Lions, where you would spend a number of years before going full circle and end up back at the Miami. So my first question to you is, as a young man, you've got all these options, these universities. You chose to leave your state, turn down the Texas teams and go to Miami. What drew you there?
Oh man, that's you guys did your research for sure. I don't even think I knew all those facts about me. But yeah, you know, I grew up watching the Canes. There was two colleges that I really loved. One was Kansas State, because my whole mom's side was from Kansas and they went to Kansas State, and so just by affiliation with them, they were all Wildcat fans, and so I was too. But I just loved the way the Hurricanes played. Watching them as when I was growing up and seeing those early 2000 games, and just, you know, a lot of people say they could be NFL teams. There was so much NFL talent and Pro Bowl talent on that 2001 team, and you know, even when I played in the video game, I would always play with the Canes. Like, I wanted to go. I just loved. I just loved that program, and I kind of recruited myself there. I got a letter from them, and then I think I called them. I was like, "Hey, I'm sending you my tape. Look at it." And I actually had one of our high school coaches help me with it, and he said he was going to call me a week later, and he didn't. So I called him back and asked him if he watched my tape yet, and if they were going to consider recruiting me. And I think I scared him. But they ended up offering me a scholarship, and that's when I knew kind of deep down that's where I always wanted to go, and just the tradition, the swagger that they played with. But really, the two biggest things was I had two goals. I wanted to win a national championship, and they were ranked 3rd in the country at the time, and winning a lot of football games, and I wanted to go to the NFL, and Miami was putting more people in the NFL than any other program. I thought that was the best program to go, and one of those things didn't come true, but the other one did. So I'm thankful.
No, I appreciate that.
So just at high school, just quickly going back to that, you played, from what I could gather, in lots of different positions. So you came out as like either a tight end or an O-lineman. You were ranked differently by different organizations in different positions, but you also played, I think, a bit of defensive end as well. I hope that's right.
That is right.
Was there a position that you saw yourself playing that you felt most comfortable in, or that you enjoyed more than the others? Or was it always like kind of you felt more comfortable at O-line and that's why you played best there?
What I felt most comfortable in, probably what I had the most fun doing, was catching passes, and when I didn't catch a ton in high school, but that was fun. Trying to make a sack instead of trying to prevent a sack. Because if you're a defensive end and you have 1 sack a game, you had a great game. If you're offensive lineman and you allowed 1 sack a game, you had a terrible game. So it was much more fun going for one than trying to get every single play right. But the tight ends that I played with at University of Miami, I played with Greg Olson, Jimmy Graham, some just Pro Bowl talent tight ends, and I was pretty realistic that that's not what the Lord blessed me with, and I had a little bit. I like pizza too much, and I wasn't quite as athletic as them, but So I kind of knew that I was going to be an offensive lineman, and so I definitely did feel more comfortable with that, and I think my body was more built for that. And so graduated high school just over 255 and right around there, and I had some weight to gain, but that was kind of the fun part.
Just totally off topic, but what was on the pizza that you're having?
Oh man,
What's the chosen toppings?
Oh man, I probably anything at that time. I would eat anything and everything you put in front of me. But I've always been a fan of like meat lovers or Supreme. Those are my two go-tos.
Man after my own heart. I just wanted to ask though, when you've missed your last couple of games in your senior year, and you missed the chance to take the record for starts as an O-lineman at Miami, was that on your radar at the time, or was your focus pretty much solely being on healthy for the draft and for the NFL?
It's funny you said that. At the time, it really wasn't on my radar. I mean, I knew about it because people told me about it. Like, oh, you're X number of games away from this record or that record. And I didn't really care about it at the time because in my mind, the only goal, knowing that we didn't have a chance to play for a championship that year, was I need to get healthy. I've worked not only this year, but, I told my dad when I was 6 years old that I wanted to play in the NFL. Like, that was the first goal I can remember having. And I was like, I've waited my whole life for this opportunity. And I want to make the most of it now. So I went and talked to Randy Shannon at the time and told him what the doctor said about my knee. And I said, hey, I'm happy to play in the bowl game if you want me to. But he said my knee needs surgery, and it needs a major surgery, and it's going to need some time to recover. And he said right away, like, get your surgery. We're playing in the Champ Sports Bowl, not the national championship, and nothing against the Champ Sports Bowl. It's just, at that time I played 47 games and was hoping to play many more in the NFL. So I don't know, but saying all that, looking back, it would have been cool to have the record. But I still think we made the right decision.
Yeah.
So now you're coming towards the draft. You're a junior at this point. Do you go to the athletic board? Do they give you a review? Do they tell you roughly what round they'll think you go in? Is that how it used to work back then? I know it does now. Were you declaring as an underclassman for the draft, I believe?
No, I didn't. Actually, I pursued it, but decided to come back for my senior year. So I did go all 4 years. Hindsight 2020, I wonder what would have happened if I did leave, because then I would have got hurt my rookie year instead of my senior year. So I wonder about that occasionally, but no, they had a system where you could apply, and then they'd have scouts get back to you at where they think you would go. And they told me second or third round. And I really wanted to be a first round pick. That was like all I cared about. I was like, I'm going to be a first round pick. So I decided to come back and ended up, hurting my knee in the last game and having to get surgery, which made getting taken in the couple rounds look much harder. But, by God's grace, I was still drafted in the 4th round and to a great team, the Lions, which I did not think I was going to the Lions. I can tell you that story if you're curious, but and then had a fun season.
Please do, yeah. Like I say, we'd like to know how it felt. You saw rounds 1, 2, 3 pass by. What was it like when you got that phone call from Detroit saying we want you?
I was ecstatic. It was a dream come true. A dream I've had for probably 15 years. But the reason why I didn't think I was going to go to Detroit is, I had a really weird draft process. I tried not to pay. I never ever tried to pay attention to the media and what reporters were saying, and message boards and Twitter. I mean, that's where trolls live. But it was really hard not to look at mock drafts. Like, you want to see kind of where you might be next year. It's like, it's what are people saying? And I was, a lot of people were saying nice things, and I could be drafted high, and but then I blew out my knee, and then I had other issues that I just couldn't get healthy on. And when our pro day was a week before the draft because I didn't work out at the combine, and when I ran my 40 a week before the draft because I hadn't been running, my agent told me to jog it, and he's like, just show them that you can move still. And I was too competitive. I tried to run. I hadn't run since the surgery, and I tore my hamstring. I literally did a face plant in front of all 32 teams, their GMs and head coaches and position coaches a week before the draft, which was not a good feeling. I think I bawled my eyes out I don't think I slept one week that night. But after that happened, Detroit was supposed to take me to dinner the next night, and the day after that they called and canceled. So I thought they were thinking like, oh, you tore your hamstring and you're an idiot and we don't want you anymore. And so my agent was like, well, there's only probably 31 teams that are considering you now. If the Lions canceled on you last minute, they probably don't want you. I was like, okay, that's okay. But they said that, they said that just because they already knew that they wanted to take me. Now I don't know what's true or not, but it was kind of it was a surprise that they picked me, but I was really thankful because Detroit's an amazing place. It was an amazing locker room. I was chatting today, 10 years almost removed, group chats that I played with, like O-line group chats, and guys that I still talk with on that team, some of the lifelong friends. And a great coaching staff. Obviously, I wish we had a few more wins, but playing in Detroit was an amazing experience. I wouldn't change anything.
Like I say, it sounds like there was a divine plan. He got hurt, they watched you slide to the round, and he still took you. Like it was in the stars, wasn't it?
It really was. I do think it was God's plan. Another thing is like Detroit had a really strong, ministry and even just a faith, a men of faith on that team, and I really think that strengthened my relationship with him as well. And so I do think it was God's plan that I landed in Detroit for more than one reason.
Who would you say was your best friend on the Lions when you first joined there?
Oh, man, I don't know. What was kind of funny is in college, all the guys hang out with each other. Like you go from practice and you all go and grab burgers or tacos or beers or something, and you just all hang out. Everybody kind of went to practice together, and then you hung out afterwards. And in the pros, it was really weird for me. I was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing after this?" And they're like, "Dude, I got 3 kids. Like, I'm going home to give bubble baths." I was like, "Oh," so you kind of realize it's you're playing with sometimes, men much older than you, and from all different walks of life. And but it would be hard to pick one. All the offensive line was really close. So a lot of them. I was always really friendly with the tight ends and quarterbacks. I just got along with them as well. Some of the defensive players too. And really everybody. I mean, like Nate Burleson was a great guy. Stephen Tulloch was a great guy. Like I talk to Tulloch today. Like it's just there were so many great people on that team. It really was a tight-knit team. It's a shame we didn't win more games.
If you have a look at the roster now, it looks like you should have won games. All the names there are like, they're so recognizable. It doesn't make sense to me that you guys didn't win more games.
It was probably me. I probably held them back. And that's so apologies to Lions fans. But yeah, we had, what was funny is like we just couldn't put it all together. It's just some games offense was clicking and defense wasn't, and then other games it was vice versa. It's just I wish we could go back in time and give some of those years another shot, because I think if a couple things went our way, and momentum is a scary thing in football. You start winning a couple games, and you can turn it around a season fast. And it's a shame that never happened.
You were on the Lions with some of the absolute greatest to go down in Lions history. You were there with Matthew Stafford. You were there with Calvin Johnson, who's obviously just been inducted into the Hall of Fame, which I imagine is a proud moment even for yourself, who was on with him for 3 years. But one notable name for a particular reason is Ndamukong Suh. More along the lines of, obviously in the future, I believe you were reunited, but also you play on total opposite sides of the line. So you would have been most likely up against him in training most of the time. What was it like to come up with a player like Ndamukong Suh in training? He was an absolute animal.
Yeah, I mean, all three of those. I don't talk to Matthew very often anymore, just outside the occasional check-in. But Matthew was so gracious to me and took me under his wing, and really such a great guy. Him and his whole family, and took care of the offensive line. And just as a side note, he got rid of the ball fast, so he was the offensive lineman loved him because he didn't take a lot of sacks. And just an amazing player. I think Stafford is. I know he just left, and I wish him the best because, he's made a lot of accolades, and I think he'd be even further recognized if he had a few more wins under his belt. But such a great player, such a great competitor. Calvin is. I can't say enough good things about Calvin. Calvin was my first day in the locker room. First day in the organization, he stopped by my locker, said, "Here's my number. Call me if you need anything. Want to help you out. I know what it's like to be the rookie." And that's rare. You don't see the superstar do that on most teams. He was by far, he was leaps and bounds better than every other player in that locker room, and he acted like he was the most humble guy in the locker room. He ended up being my next door neighbor for 3 years, and he was the type of guy, if I was unloading groceries, he'd come out and help me. And so it was such a, even though I had nothing to do, not one bit of his success and his Hall of Fame success and the records he broke and everything else, it was a really even a special moment for me to see him be inducted into the Hall of Fame. No one deserves it more than him, and he is just such an amazing person. And Ndamukong Suh, we were drafted in the same draft class. We were, even for like rookie mini camp, we were roommates and played with him for 5 out of my 6 years, and just a heck of a competitor as well. He was built like a train. He was just solid muscle everywhere, and we probably got into it a few times on the practice field. But on game days, he's a guy you want on your side, because he normally made a lot of plays and was a wrecking ball out there.
Speaking of Ndamukong Suh, I believe that will now take us. So you spent a few years in the Lions, you dealt with a few injuries. In your final year, I believe it was Jeff Backus you managed to replace. But after that year, then you would go full circle, return back to South Florida, and you would end up with the Dolphins. So that must have been quite fun. And we know well for there, you must know Dan Campbell very well. Will he have been the interim coach while he was there?
Yeah. I got to play 2 more years with the Dolphins. Primarily at right tackle, a few games at left. Detroit and Miami are like the most polar opposite places in the U.S. and probably the world. But both Detroit and Miami both have special places in my heart for similar and different reasons. Just Miami's an amazing place, great guys as well. It was fun. Got to finish my career there, and you mentioned Dan Campbell, man. I love that man. He is such a great coach. And I am so pumped that the Lions landed him. So the Lions got better the day they got Dan Campbell. He is a motivator. He's a competitor. He will get everyone in that locker room ready to run through a brick wall on game day. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens.
I think
That's
we're
what we
all
all
ready.
ready to hear. That's what we're hoping he brings.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all ready to run through a brick wall for him already, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure you probably might have heard the kneecap speech by now, which is
I have.
almost NFL legend at this point. Has he always been like that? Is that sort of kind of public persona which you've put out to us?
No, that's him. That's him. He is a guy that, like, if you got in a bar fight and you got to pick one person on this world to be in your corner with you, like, he's that guy, because if there's an ounce of life in him, he's fighting. Whether that's biting kneecaps or whatever it may do, he is going to come at you and come at you and come at you again. And I think that's what he said in that speech. But it's true. But if he is able, and I think he will be able to, instill that throughout the rest of the team as far as a culture and a mindset, Detroit could get scary good.
I love that. I love that so much. In terms of your learning, you said you wanted to come back for your senior year to become a first-round pick. Was getting your degree part of that decision? And then obviously you went to do your MBA during your time with the Dolphins. Was that something which was always on your radar from, like, when you were in college? It's like, this is what I want to do. I want to have an exit plan. Or how did it all come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was a nice bonus to come back and finish my degree, because I only had one semester left. I ended in the fall after my senior season was done and graduated. But if that report would have came back and said I was a first rounder, I would have probably left. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have. Yeah, I would have came back and finished the degree some other time. But it was nice, and like we said earlier, it was God's plan, and got to get my degree. And no, the NBA was not on my route or on my my plan. Got back to Miami. The NFL just announced this current player and former player tuition program, and had a select number of colleges that they recommended and worked with, and the University of Miami was one. I kind of felt like the stars were lining up again. Is that I'm in Miami. This is where I went to undergrad. My career has a handful of years left. The NFL is going to, pay for this, and why not spend off seasons to do something that could better my life after football? And that was kind of the mindset. It made off seasons almost as brutal as training camp, because it was jam packed. But really, looking back, really glad I did it.
How are you doing for time? Can I ask?
I got a few more minutes.
Well, we'll go to Aaron's point. He noticed before that you were. I'll speak up to Aaron. You played in London.
Yes, it worried me a little bit, because I was like, oh, you left in 2013, but it was 2014 and 15. The Lions came and played in Wembley, so you'd have just missed it. And then it was, oh, wait, hang on. The Dolphins came over both of those years as well. And you were lucky enough to be able to play in both of them. You were part of the absolute thrashing of the Oakland Raiders, but also part of another result against the New York Jets, which we'll probably not speak as much about.
Yeah.
How did you find that? Obviously, as a British podcast of the of NFL fans, it was such a cool experience. Exciting.
It was such a cool experience. From a logistical standpoint, that's a little, that weighs on the players a lot, because it's just you just finish a game, and then you're depending on how far deep you're in the season, some guys are sore or beat up, and then now you gotta fly across the pond and then do that. But once you're there, if you just took the flights out of it, it was such a cool experience, meeting guys like yourself and people that are fans of football. And it's weird to describe it, but in American stadiums, a lot of arenas are kind of quiet, and then when a big play happens, it roars. And I felt like in Wembley, there was always this kind of like noise and ambiance, and kind of like the fans just kind of in it, and it felt really cool. And then obviously when a touchdown or something happened, it still erupted, but it felt like, when you watch a soccer game and you hear all this like background, like the whistles and the streamers and all these fun noises, it was like, it felt, there was a different energy around it. It was amazing walking around London and seeing so many Dolphins uniforms and just talking to people. It was such a cool experience. I'm so glad I got to do that, not only once but twice. One
of the things that always just mesmerizes me in the States is the merging of both sets of fans. So you watch a game and there's a Lions fan, say, sat next to a Titans fan when the Lions playing. It's amazing, and it doesn't happen over here. There'll be too many fights. There are already too many fights with fans segregated. But obviously you guys are a bit more used to having fans together and drinking together and enjoying it. But what's it like coming over to London and not just seeing, say, Dolphins fans sat next to Raiders fans? You sat there, you've got Dolphins fans next to Raiders fans, next to Falcons fans. All 32 teams are represented. As much as the Dolphins and Raiders fans, say, for example, are the ones who want to be there to see their team, everybody in that stadium is just so happy that you are there, because it's so different for us. What's that kind of atmosphere? What's that like, just seeing all 32 jerseys represented across 8,000 people?
It was cool because you see it not only around London, but also pouring into the game. You would see, like you said, all 32 jerseys, and you don't see that in the States. You'll see 2 different jerseys, or then maybe a few other, like, a college jersey of their favorite player on that team, or something a little, if they want to get a little crazy. But you could just see how many NFL fans there are over there, and how many just passionate fans. And it was cool to be able to go over there and not only play in front of everyone, but also interact with you guys at the hotel and around town and before the game, and having conversations. And had so many of the conversations like this. It's like, oh man, it's so cool that you guys are over here. And I don't know, it was a lot of fun. I don't know, there was something else I was gonna say, but I forgot it.
That's cool. I've got one last one. Just on your career now, obviously, I mean, I find your cut perplexing, just because the best year of your career was the year before you were cut. And I'm kind of theorized maybe partly that's due to Laramie Tunstall's drafting, but maybe I'll leave that to one side. In terms of what you do now and the company that you founded, was that an idea that you'd thought of while you were in the NFL and you kind of have brought it to fruition since, or was it something that you kind of came to after you left? How did that all come about?
Yeah, the timing of the NFL ending and the next chapter starting, like we said several times already, that was God's plan. I did have some internal health concerns. That was the reason why I had to stop playing. I had some heart issues, unfortunately. Those have been taken care of now, knock on wood. But that was a big part of the reason why I needed to move on from football. But yeah, the idea behind earbuds came from my second year, actually, from the Lions, watching Cam Newton warm up. Cam had just been drafted #1 overall, and watching him have headphones on, very similar to the ones I'm wearing, just dancing and jamming and getting his teammates and the crowd into the game. And that was my first thought. I was curious what he was listening to, but I thought, with the 85,000 people in the stands and the millions more watching at home, and the millions of people that follow him on social, how many people would want to tune in and listen along with them right now? And what would Cam say if he knew they were listening in? And that was really an idea I never never forgot about. And if you turned on any other NBA or X Games or Olympics, that was the common thread, was everybody had their headphones on. And then fast forward several years to 2016 when Michael Phelps was listening to music before the 2016 Summer Olympics. It was the number one thing trending worldwide on Twitter is what's Phelps listening to. So that's what we're trying to deliver. We're trying to bring people together through music, and we partnered with the 4 major streaming services: Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, and Amazon. And we allow people to listen together in real time or on demand. And we're completely hardware and provider agnostic. So if everyone on this call had a different streaming service, we could all tune in and listen together. And we're excited about it. We have a lot of positive momentum rolling right now, and we're looking to keep building on that.
I know that this isn't like pressing news, but I've just got it downloaded now. We will put a link into that as well into the app in our when the interview's uploaded.
Free advertising, like say, everyone wins.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Any last questions, boys?
No. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I enjoyed meeting all of you, and that was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on. It's a real thrill.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. All right, well, you guys enjoy your weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Bye.